The air in the federal courtroom was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of floor polish and anxiety. I watched my sister Amanda, the family's golden child, who always believed her brilliance made her invincible. She sat beside her expensive lawyer, whispering with a smug confidence that turned my stomach. The bailiff, a master sergeant with a jaw set in granite, entered and his voice boomed. "All rise." The judge gave a curt nod. The prosecutor, a sharp army major whose uniform was pressed to perfection, stood to address the court. He spoke with a clipped, formal tone. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the government would like to acknowledge the presence of the convening authority for this general court-martial." The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. I saw the flicker of confusion on Amanda's face, a brief moment of curiosity before the bailiff's voice cut through the silence, announcing the Deputy Commander, USS Army Cyber Command, Brigadier General Jessica Carter. I watched the smirk on her face, the one she'd worn my entire life, simply melt away. Her skin went pale, a stark white against her designer suit, her mouth falling open as her world tilted on its axis. She saw me, truly saw me, for the very first time, but that look of pure blood-drained shock didn't begin in the courtroom. It began 6 months earlier under the warm lights of an overpriced restaurant. The entire evening was a shrine to Amanda's success, a celebration for her promotion to senior vice president at a top defense contracting firm. My parents, a pair who had long ago traded fairness for quiet comfort, hung on her every word. I was home on a rare leave, a silent ghost at the feast, watching the familiar scene unfold. It was the same as the science fair I won that they forgot. The academic scholarships they called a nice little hobby. This was just another entry in the ledger. Then, emboldened by her third glass of champagne, Amanda turned to a guest at their table, a man I recognized instantly as a senior executive, one of her firm's most important clients. She gestured to me with a dismissive wave. "My little sister Jessie here even tried the army once," she announced to the table, her voice dripping with faux pity. "Couldn't even make it through basic training. Now she shuffles papers at some government office." She paused for effect, letting the lie settle over the table. "But we all find our level, right?" A cold fury, quiet and deep, settled in my gut. I saw the executive's eyes flicker towards me, his expression unreadable, a careful mask of neutrality. He knew exactly what a statement like that meant, what it implied about the seriousness of the military he worked with. Amanda saw it only as a joke at my expense, a story she'd told so many times she believed it herself. She winked at the table, expecting them all to laugh along. She had no idea she'd just dismissed my entire career to the very man I was scheduled to brief at the Pentagon the next morning. To understand the silent tectonic shift that just happened and the reckoning that would follow, you have to understand the two lives my family forced me to lead. To truly understand the woman who walked into that courtroom, you have to understand the girl she was forced to leave behind. My entire life was built on a foundation of dual realities, the one my family constructed for me and the one I built for myself in silence. The family's narrative was cemented on a hot Sunday afternoon in June, the summer I turned 18. We were gathered in the living room, the air thick with the scent of my mother's pot roast and my father's suffocating pride. My sister Amanda, the golden child destined for greatness, had just received her official acceptance letter to an Ivy League business school. My father, Robert, a man who valued the shine of success far more than the grit it took to achieve it, was practically beaming. He presented her with a wrapped set of keys, the bell glistening under the lamplight. A brand new sedan sat in the driveway, a 4,000-pound trophy declaring her worth. My mother, Helen, a woman who treated my father's approval like the family's North Star, clapped her hands together. "Oh, Mandy, it's perfect. Your path is so much clearer now, so much safer." It was a direct comparison. A subtle but sharp jab meant just for me. An hour earlier, I had tried to share my own news. I stood there in my crisp ROC uniform, holding a letter that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I had been awarded a slot at officer candidate school, a position so competitive I hadn't even let myself dream of it. My father had patted me on the back, a hollow, dismissive gesture. "That's nice, honey. Just be careful." He didn't ask what it meant. He didn't ask about the training, the leadership, the commitment. He saw a hobby, a phase. Later, my mother handed me an envelope. Inside was a $50 gift certificate to a bookstore. The internal ledger clicked over, adding another entry, a car for the daughter with the clear path and a bookstore voucher for the one taking a strange, embarrassing detour. I felt the pride I'd carried all day curdle in my stomach, replaced by a cold, heavy resignation. This, I thought to myself, is my place. This is what they think I am worth. Now contrast that memory with my reality 15 years later. The setting isn't a warm, sunlit living room, but a cold, sterile skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility buried deep within Fort Me. The only sound is the low hum of servers processing secrets that could topple governments. I stood at the head of a mahogany table, a colonel in the United States Army, the lead investigator for a counterintelligence probe named Operation Gilded Cage. My audience wasn't my dismissive father, but a 3-star general with more command experience than my father had years on this earth. He didn't pat me on the back. He listened, his eyes locked on mine, absorbing every word. "The initial SIGINT is undeniable, sir," I stated, my voice steady, echoing slightly in the secure room. "The data breach originated from their internal servers, not an outside threat. We believe a senior executive is selling proprietary targeting data directly to a non-state actor." I pointed to a complex network chart on the screen, a web of deceit I had spent months untangling. "The Uniform Code of Military Justice gives us full jurisdiction because they are operating under a Title 10 contract. Their corruption is a direct threat to our personnel overseas." There were no condescending smiles, no pats on the head. There was only the quiet, intense respect of professionals engaged in a high-stakes mission. The general looked at my analysis, then back at me. "What do you need, Colonel?" he asked. His question wasn't a dismissal. It was a blank check of trust and authority. I felt a sense of belonging in that cold, windowless room that I had never once felt in the house I grew up in. This was my world. This was my value. That feeling was shattered by a simple phone call a few weeks later. My mother's number flashed on my phone, and I answered with the practiced calm I'd perfected over the years. "Jessica, you should be more like your sister," she began, her voice bright and completely oblivious. "She's invited us to a gala in Brussels. Her company is flying us out first class. It's all so glamorous." I looked around my sparse functional office, the wall covered in classified operational maps. Glamorous wasn't the word for it. "When are you going to settle down from that temp job of yours and find something real?" A temp job. I was managing an operation with a budget in the tens of millions, overseeing personnel across 3 continents, and briefing the highest levels of military command. And my own mother thought I was working a temp job. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. She was excited about a party in a city whose security I was partially responsible for. A city that was safe because of people like me doing unreal jobs. The conversation was just another reminder of the chasm between their perception and my reality. It was a chasm I had long since stopped trying to bridge. For 15 years, I had accepted the narrative. I let them believe I was the quiet failure. It was easier than trying to explain a world they couldn't comprehend. But when the primary target of Operation Gilded Cage was identified, I realized the 2 worlds were about to collide. The target was my sister, Amanda. The moment I saw Amanda's name on the primary target list for Operation Gilded Cage, a cold clinical clarity washed over me. The tangled emotions of 15 years, the hurt, the frustration, the quiet resentment receded, replaced by the sharp, clean lines of duty. My first action was to walk into the office of my commanding officer, General Michael Elson, a man who saw soldiers, not sons and daughters, and who valued integrity above all else. I laid out the situation, formally stating my personal connection to the target and the potential for a conflict of interest. I was prepared to be recused to hand the case over and walk away. General Michael Elson listened without interruption, his gaze steady. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Colonel," he finally said, his voice firm, "your intimate knowledge of the players isn't a conflict. It's a strategic asset. You will remain in command of the operational side of this investigation." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. "The prosecution will be handled by JAG. Your job is to deliver them an airtight case free of any doubt. This will be done by the book. Is that understood?" His words weren't just an order, they were a profound vote of confidence in my professionalism over my past. My response wasn't a dramatic phone call to my sister. There were no tearful confrontations or angry accusations. My war was fought in silence with the stroke of a pen. My fury was channeled into flawless forensics reports. Each time I signed a warrant or authorized a subpoena, it was a move in a chess game she didn't even know she was playing. I spent my nights under the harsh fluorescent lights of my office, reviewing digital evidence logs with my cyber teams and coordinating with the JAG lawyers. We ensured every piece of evidence against her was unimpeachable, logged meticulously under the correct articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. My actions were precise, unemotional, and utterly unstoppable. One rainy Tuesday, my aide, Chief Warrant Officer for Davis, a man of few words but absolute competence, entered my office and placed a single document on my desk. "Ma'am," he said with the slightest hint of a smile, "the promotion board results are in. You've been selected." My eyes scanned the page, and the words seemed to lift off it. Promotion to Brigadier General effective next month. It wasn't just a career milestone, it was the final critical piece of the puzzle falling into place. The promotion meant I would become the convening authority, the officer with the ultimate power to approve the court-martial against my own sister. The system I had dedicated my life to, the one my family mocked, was about to hand me the scales of justice. The case file grew thicker by the day, a monument of digital evidence and sworn testimony. Amanda hired a team of expensive lawyers who thought they were fighting a corporate lawsuit. They had no idea they were preparing for war against a system they didn't understand and a general they never saw coming. The day of the reckoning arrived not with a storm, but with the chilling, sterile silence of a general court-martial. The chamber at the Washington Navy Yard was a place built to intimidate. Dark wood flags standing like stoic soldiers in the corners, and the Great Seal of the United States looming over the judge's bench. It was a room that reeked of tradition and consequence. From my designated waiting area, I could picture the scene perfectly. My sister Amanda would be sitting at the defendant's table, radiating an aura of profound annoyance. She wouldn't look scared. She would look inconvenienced, as if this whole affair was a tedious legal pothole on her gilded highway to success. Her expensive lawyers would be whispering reassurances, feeding the delusion that this was just another corporate battle she could win. And in the gallery, my parents would be sitting ramrod straight, projecting an image of unwavering support for their brilliant, unfairly accused daughter. I knew with a certainty forged over decades of invisibility that they would be scanning the public seating. They'd be looking for me, for Jessie. They'd expect to see me slip in clad in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, my face etched with worry for my poor sister. They were there to offer moral support against what they'd called a ridiculous corporate misunderstanding, completely oblivious to the fact that the misunderstanding was and always had been entirely their own. They were waiting for the black sheep, but a wolf was at the door. The trial began, and I could hear the muffled sounds through the heavy wood. The lead prosecutor, the same disciplined major I'd seen in the briefing, would be laying out the case with the cold, irrefutable precision of a surgeon. He would speak of procurement fraud, of data exfiltration, of a conspiracy that threatened national security. He would mention the name of the investigation, Operation Gilded Cage. I could imagine the first flicker of genuine unease on Amanda's face. Then the major would state that the entire complex operation had been conceived and overseen by one of the Army's top cyber warfare commanders. He would ask my operational title, a name that meant nothing to my family. Commander Task Force Sentinel. It was a ghost, a title without a face, just more military jargon to them. Then came the pause, the moment designed for maximum impact. The bailiff would announce that the convening authority for the trial would be observing the day's proceedings. I stood outside the doors, my heart a slow, steady drum in my chest. I smoothed the front of my Army service uniform, the iconic pinks and greens. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was justice, a cold, clean, and final correction of the record. This was for the oath I swore and the uniform I had earned. Ribbon by silent ribbon. The bailiff's voice echoed as he opened the door. "All rise," announcing the Deputy Commander, USS Army Cyber Command, Brigadier General Jessica Carter. I stepped through the doorway and into the light. The first thing that happened was the sound. A sudden sharp scrape of chairs as the entire room, including the judge, snapped to attention. The air became thick with a sudden deferred silence. I let my eyes sweep the room for a fraction of a second. I saw the prosecutor, the defense, the jury of decorated senior officers. I saw my immaculate reflection in the polished wood of the witness stand. The single silver star on each of my shoulders felt as heavy as an anchor, holding me steady. My ribbon rack, a silent testament to deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen other places they never knew I'd been, told the story of my life in vivid color. Then I allowed myself to look at them. Amanda's face was a canvas of collapsing realities. It wasn't a simple shock. It was a multi-stage detonation of her entire worldview. First, confusion. Why is Jessie in a uniform? Then a flicker of cognitive dissonance as her brain tried to reconcile the washout from her stories with the high-ranking officer before her. Finally, a wave of bone-white horror washed over her features as the truth hit her like a physical blow. Her jaw hung open. Her carefully constructed arrogance shattered into a million pieces. The name, the title, the rank. It all connected in one soul-crushing moment of clarity. My gaze drifted to my father. This man who prided himself on his 2 years as a draftee in the 60s, who loved to tell stories about respecting the chain of command, was lurching to his feet. It wasn't a choice. It was a clumsy, involuntary reaction, his body snapping into a pathetic version of attention before his mind could even process why. He was standing for me, not for his daughter, but for my rank. The ultimate, undeniable show of respect, forced upon him by the very institution he belittled me for joining. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't need to. I kept my eyes forward, my expression a mask of professional neutrality. I walked with a steady, measured pace to my designated seat, gave a crisp, respectful nod to the judge, and sat down. My very presence in that chair was the final piece of evidence against her. My sister had always seen me as small, in that courtroom, surrounded by the weight and authority of the United States military. She finally saw me from my true size. The trial concluded not with a bang, but with the quiet final scratch of a pen after the jury of my sister's new peers, a panel of grim-faced, decorated colonels, delivered a guilty verdict on all counts. A clerk brought the official findings to my desk. As the convening authority, the final word was mine. I picked up the heavy government tissue pen, and for a moment, the weight of my entire life seemed to be concentrated in that single point of metal and ink. I saw the ghost of the girl getting a $50 gift certificate, the young officer being patted on the head, the colonel being told she worked a temp job. Then I saw the general whose duty was clear. My signature was firm, a simple, clean line. The ledger was balanced. I rose from my seat and walked out of the courtroom without a single backward glance. I didn't need to see my family huddled together in their shared shock and isolation. Their chapter in my life was over, and the book was now closed. In the hallway, General Michael Elson was waiting for me. He looked at me, his expression unreadable as always, but his eyes held a deep, quiet respect. "Good work, General," he said, his voice low, clean. That one word was worth more than 1,000 apologies. It was the highest praise one professional could give another, an acknowledgement of a difficult duty performed with absolute integrity. "It was my duty, sir," I replied, and the words felt truer than any I had ever spoken. A year can change everything. The silence that followed the trial wasn't empty. It was filled with work, with purpose, with a peace I had never known. 1 year to the day, I stood on a different kind of stage under much warmer lights. I was at the graduation ceremony for the U.S. Army War College, addressing the next generation of America's senior leaders. A sea of colonels and newly minted generals, the best and brightest in the armed forces, looked up at me as I delivered the keynote address. My family had always valued the loudest voice in the room, but I had learned that true power lies in quiet authority. Command, I told them, my voice, calm and steady, is not a prize to be won. It is a burden to be carried. In the digital battlefields of the 21st century, your integrity will be your only impenetrable armor. Your ethics will be your most effective weapon. I spoke of the silent sacrifices, the lonely decisions, and the moral courage required to lead when no one is watching. I was not just giving a speech. I was telling my own story in a language they all understood. I was sharing the lessons learned in the quiet, unseen corners of my life. and in that hall, I felt more seen and heard than ever before. This was my legacy, not one of blood, but of service. After the ceremony, I was surrounded not by fawning sycophants, but by my peers, my true family. They didn't offer empty praise. They engaged with my ideas, debating the finer points of cyber warfare ethics and sharing their own experiences. We were a family forged not by obligation, but by a shared purpose and a deep mutual respect. My trusted aide, Colonel Davis, made his way through the crowd. He wasn't a chief warrant officer anymore. His own excellence had carried him forward. "A word, General?" he asked, handing me a secure tablet. An urgent operational update flickered on the screen. I was immediately absorbed, my focus shifting from the ceremony to the mission. I was in my element, a leader among leaders, completely at home. It was in that moment of quiet contentment that my personal phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half distracted, and saw a text message from a number I hadn't heard from in a year. It was my mother. The message was short, a lifetime of regret compressed into a few desperate words. "Jessica, we are so proud of you. We just never knew. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, and for a fleeting second, I felt the ghost of an old pain, a faint echo of the little girl who would have given anything to read those words. But it was just that, an echo, the feeling past replaced by a calm, settled peace. I realized their pride, their acknowledgement. It was no longer a currency I had any use for. My worth had been forged and validated elsewhere. I slid the phone back into my pocket without replying, the screen dark, the message unread. I placed it face down on a table and turned back to my team. My peace was finally my own. It was no longer theirs to give, and it was no longer theirs to take away. My family believed a legacy was defined by a name they recognized. I learned that a true legacy is defined by the uniform you earn and the authority it represents. If you've ever had to build your own definition of success while others tried to write you off, share your story in the comments. In this community, we salute your service.